idiots. Gave them every opportunity. Solar, wind, wireless power transmission. Why, oh, why do they need to keep making their God-forsaken bombs?
This may appear paradoxical, but they make them feel safe.
Nice to see you again, John.
It's nice to see you too, Adrian. How did you know it was me?
Because only Dr. Manhattan would have the balls to show up here wearing nothing but his birthday suit.
I'm blue, I've been deed, I've been died, 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 I've been deed, I've been died.
Hello and welcome to Who Watches, a show about the HBO series Watchmen. I'm Travis Fishburne.
I'm Ryan DeVere.
And I'm Dustin Meadows.
And this week we'll be discussing Season 1, Episode 8, A God Walks into Abar, or Abar. When I was watching it last night and leading up to it, I kept seeing A God Walks into a Bar. And then Regina King tweeted yesterday, there's A God Walks into a Bar. And I'm like, oh, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Is this supposed to be read two different ways?
Nice little play on the
I didn't catch that at all.
Yeah, and then even this morning, while I was watching it on HBO Now, the title initially said, A God Walks into a space bar. And then I had to stop and refresh at some point, and it had already changed the title to A Bar.
Yeah.
So this is the bicycle thief / bicycle thieves all over again. Yeah, a lot of heavy, interesting stuff going on in this episode.
Yeah.
What are your guys' initial impressions?
Some of my early assumptions being proven correct, which is always a nice feeling. I like finding out I was right about things.
Yeah. Tell your sister. Yeah. You're right.
Yeah, it was a good episode. It was I feel like it's been really interesting that the back half of this season the episodes have been so focused
on single
a
character,
which is really cool. Which, I mean, that's what the comic did to an extent. It was like, hey, except they split it out. They spread it out a little bit more.
Sometimes it'd be back to back.
It's like real
sometimes
world,
it'd be
and then here's single character.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas this has just been kind of single character backstories in a row, which has been kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. Interwoven with the plot sometimes not at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, we finally get to see good old Dr. Manhattan himself. And so Ryan, what were your impressions of
I really thought they were going to try, you can't do Watchmen without addressing Dr. Manhattan on some level.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think we were going to get a lot of him in this series. I thought they were going to try and put some distance between that because whenever he shows up, it makes things messy. But
and you can't help but focus on him.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
it's a similar thing. What happened when they were when JJ was writing Star Wars Episode 7, and the fact that Luke doesn't show up until the very end. They had tried putting Luke into the script, and the issue they kept having was every time Luke showed up, that's where all the focus went. That's where the writers and that's where the audience wants to look. And I think the same can be said for Dr. Manhattan. Which is probably why they waited so long.
And he's central to the story, too. He really is,
It's the MacGuffin.
Yeah, everything that happens in this world, the world being the way it is, hinges on his existence entirely. No Dr. Manhattan, none of this.
Yeah.
Or at least a good chunk of this doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
He is the reason the timeline shifts, though, right? That's the split in
the way technology works and everything. Yeah, and Vietnam,
the technology, the Vietnam outcome, Nixon not resigning over Watergate, him holding on for another couple terms,
which is then really what inspires Adrian to kind of go the route he is, because the world's heading towards the Civil War,
towards nuclear disaster.
Yeah.
He really is. He's kind of the guiding catalyst behind every major change that happens during this period.
Yeah.
So he's both the plot device and the MacGuffin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
He's a
mean,
lot.
it's hard to essentially be a god and not have some kind of impact on the way of the world,
Yeah.
especially if you're a god living amongst not necessarily his creations, but creations in general.
Hmm. And specifically, I feel like it is such a daunting task to bring him into the picture on every level. From a writing level, you have to write that character just right.
Mm-hmm.
From a performance level, there's a lot of weight on the shoulders of the actor playing him, and then just like on a visual level, there's a way to portray him, how he's written or how he's drawn by Dave Gibbons, but how do you translate that into film, television, whatever approach they take? If you take the CG approach, like in the Snyder film, and then in this episode, as we see, there's definitely a bunch of just makeup and prosthetics that they used.
Yeah, I like too that they address the glowing in a practical way. Like he decided to not do that, so that he just looks like another person. Because we even see like 3 or 4 dudes like painted up like Dr. Manhattan in the bar where he meets Angela in the beginning. So
it blends in perfectly on VVN Day, which we can go ahead and get into that scene right now. So the episode opens on the streets of Saigon during VVN Day of 2009. We hear Dr. Manhattan arrive off screen, pick up a blue mask, and walk into a bar. He finds Angela Abar and is able to convince her to share a drink with him when he correctly answers why she is there, drinking alone. She is dubious of his identity as he's supposed to be on Mars. He shares with her how he experiences time and then tells her that he is actually on Europa, creating life. He creates 2 beings and teleports a manor house to Europa for them to live upon. So just right off the bat, we get a lot of
all kinds
things,
of answers.
Answered right away. First and foremost being how Angela and Dr. Manhattan meet for the first time.
Mm-hmm. We get an answer to... We were theorizing that there was doctored footage of Dr. Manhattan on Mars, but that doesn't seem to be the case. It seems like he just has copies. Is that what he was trying to explain there?
Yeah, he says that it is actually, it's a recording of me.
Right.
Yeah, it's a recording that they keep using over and over again. According to like a Wikipedia article from True a few weeks ago, they say that True is the one responsible for sharing the Dr. Manhattan footage of him building sandcastles over and over and over again. Which you think some people would have kind of gotten the idea.
Yeah.
Like why is the most powerful, smartest being in the world just doing the same thing over and over and over again?
Maybe he's a perfectionist.
Yeah.
I love that he... the portrayal of him in this, like you said, it has to be perfect on so many different fronts. The writing has to be believable, that he is experiencing all timelines at the same time. The performance has to portray that. I do appreciate that they opted to keep his face hidden, more or less, or at least obscured. Because it's not important, right? Like they deliberately choose to keep that from you because that's not what this is about.
I actually like the first shot we see of his face is through the beer glass.
Yeah.
So it's like kind of distorted and obscure. I thought that was a really cool shot.
Yeah. He Damon Lindelof in one of the first podcasts when he's talking about Dr. Manhattan, the presence of him throughout not just this episode, but the series as a whole, he talks about it being like a shark and how his presence is a fin and how much fin can you see before you actually have to show the shark. And it just makes me think of Jaws and how you do not see the shark for the majority of that movie, but his presence is felt throughout.
Absolutely.
So, like you said, a very similar thing happening in here.
Yeah, and they're playing a game with you. Mm-hmm. And it worked very well because obviously he's the most interesting thing that's going to be in any scene that he's a part of.
Yeah, all eyes are on him.
Is the way that he's talking about, he's experiencing everything all at once. Mm-hmm. Is that pretty consistent then with the comics?
Straight out of the comics.
Yeah.
When you read the comic, issue 4 is his chapter, and it's a very contained story where it's his origin story, but it's him as he's just like sitting on Mars and experiencing it, and there's a multitude of different times and images and feelings that he's experiencing all at once, and parallels between all of them. So
Yeah, and he even has that line to Angela too, which I can't remember if it was directly in the comic, but like it definitely speaks to the frustration of like talking to him about how it literally is frustrating to other people the way he experiences things.
yeah,
It's like he's sitting there telling her like things are going to happen 6 months from now, things are going to happen 10 years from now, and then like refusing to go into specifics on some of those because he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to.
he can't alter anything. Yeah,
Yeah.
and how people are frustrated. Like, you already told me that, you knew that. He's like, no, but you're telling me that right now. It's like what Lori is frustrated with him on Mars about is she's like, what, you have to just go through the motions and be a puppet like everybody else? He's like, yeah, we're all puppets. I'm just the one who can see the strings. I have to go through the motions. Otherwise, there's no logical reason why this event leads to this event that leads to this event. So it's kind of a mind-bending concept.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but he can, and we covered this kind of in this episode, that he's experiencing even his childhood and stuff before he was Dr.
Yes,
Manhattan.
his
It's
whole life.
all of it.
Yeah.
From his existence, he experiences all of it all the time in every moment.
Yeah.
And so like there's this, and he starts to touch on it in the episode, but like anything that happens to him is with him forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, and so his choices, even in relationships and whatnot, he knows it's going to end in tragedy, whatever. That's with him forever. He will always experience that in its moment. He's talks later about being afraid, and like he's always afraid.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. That's a cool character.
It is.
Oh yeah, no, it's a great character, and he's, I think a lot of people kind of miss that aspect of him. That like, even though he has trouble relating to humans, like he very much like that fear is present, that having to go through the motions, that like that even though he knows what's going to happen, he can't do anything to alter it.
Right. There's this dichotomy within him that is he is the closest any human has gotten to God.
Yeah.
And yet, in a lot of ways, the farthest away we've ever gotten. Like,
Of
he can't change anything.
having
He
any
can't,
power.
Right. He has, to everybody else, he has limitless power. But to him, it's like, I'm helpless to do this next thing. It has to happen.
exactly.
Yeah,
That's
like
it.
even his powers are like bound within him knowing how he's going to use them.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, that's a cool character. I don't know.
Yeah, Angela even has that, says something to him to the effect of like, if he's like masquerading like the way that Zeus would disguise himself as animals to try to get laid.
Yeah, and
which I thought
that's
was a really
very
funny,
fitting.
Which is kind of Dr. Manhattan's whole thing. Is I know we mentioned it before, like pretty much all of his real human connections are lovers that he's taken over his life.
Angela's the third one,
Yeah.
third major one at least that we know of.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of fun, interesting things in this scene. It begins with Rhapsody in Blue.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good little Blue reference.
Perfect.
That song always makes me think of Gremlins 2. And he walks into Mr. Eddie's bar, which I wonder if that's a
little nod to the comedian. It's interesting. And the mural has changed.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
the one that
Well, it
said
doesn't say
murderer.
murderer anymore. I don't remember exactly what it said, but it did not say murderer.
Yeah, there's a
in
lot of things going on there.
bloody
including,
letters. Like it's been built upon in the
Mhm.
time since Angela was a child.
Also, from last, we talked about, I think it was off podcast about Shazam.
Mm-hmm.
The one of the girls in the group home is young Angela.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Huh.
As soon as I started watching that, I went, "Oh, I recognize that girl."
Oh,
Oh,
there
Yeah.
you go.
Not
She's got
really.
a great gig playing orphan children.
Yeah, right. Typecast.
oh my. But then, and we finally get confirmation that he did create Phillips and Crookshank on Europa as his own Adam and Eve. And he transported that manor there, which Angela's very curious why he would transport a manor there instead of building one himself. And he says that it has a special place in him from his childhood. And we see a young John Osterman arriving at the manor in the English countryside. And while there, John witnesses the owners of the manor having sex while he hides in a closet. They later talk to him and tell him that what he saw was actually beautiful and they were creating a life. They then gift him with a Bible and ask him to make it his purpose to create something beautiful when he grows up.
I mean, I got major Game of Thrones Bran.
Yeah.
I was like,
you thought something bad's going to happen.
He's getting flung out a window. Nope.
No.
They just wanted to have a nice chat about his future.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I figured it wasn't going to end badly, or he wouldn't have created his life in their image.
It's very interesting to see his origins go back even further from what we
Yeah.
know. Yeah, I found that very interesting. A lot of the things that we're seeing, we'll see references to things via dialogue, but the show itself refuses to actually show, I think with the exclusion of the event that happened with Looking Glass's flashback episode, we do not see really any direct things from the comic like being brought to life.
Yeah.
Like they could have easily shown like him and the intrinsic field generator and everything happening there, but they don't. He just talks about it later.
No, we get this added insight to him and his father fleeing Nazi-occupied Germany.
Yeah.
Which is, again, a whole other layer to it. We find out that his mother left his father for an SS officer,
Yep.
of all people. So then they had to leave.
Yeah. And then we also get kind of the origin of Angela and Cal having sex in closets because he associates sex with being in a closet.
Oh, yes. I did not make that connection. But yeah, that checks out. That tracks.
Yeah. Get a good little nod of his father repairing a watch. His father is known as the watchmaker.
Has a little comment there about it's like the one thing he can try and fix or something.
Yeah, because he clearly from the little interaction they have, he doesn't seem to be a very good or caring father.
No.
He definitely treats John more like a hassle than anything.
Yeah.
But that, from what I know about John throughout the comics, I mean that's kind of the frustration he has. Is he's just trying to fix problems and they don't get fixed.
Yeah.
And as he, I think, comes to realize is fixing things to him is a lot more easy and simple than trying to fix people and
Yes.
relationships.
Yeah, which, well, he comes by it honestly, at least.
Right.
And Angela remarks that he has a fantastic imagination, and she asks why he left the Garden of Eden, and he tells her it was so he could meet her and that he loves her. Angela convinces him to take off the blue mask, and she explains that his tactics are wrong because she hates Dr. Manhattan. And she explains that Dr. Manhattan's influence resulted in the death of her parents 22 years ago on this night. He says that Vietnam was a regrettable decision in which he was trying to do the right thing. He then tries again to convince her to have dinner tomorrow night, and she's concerned about his appearance. And he tells her that she's currently come up with an elegant solution. And then we cut to a morgue 2 weeks later where Angela offers Dr. Manhattan a selection of corpses that he can choose from to take physical form. They then choose the body of Calvin Jelani, who dropped dead of a heart attack and has no next of kin. More answers to questions that I think have been plaguing people for the
poor
past
sap
week.
that he just took over their body.
No.
Well, I mean, it is, but he wasn't
Well, he
using
didn't
it
kill
anymore.
the person in the process.
Right.
But,
No.
Which is part of that was what I was concerned was going to be the case.
Oh, that would have been real dark.
Yeah. It's like, that seems a little too dark, even for Dr. Manhattan.
I meant to check the timestamp on this because when he first walks up, he says something to her about why she's drinking and her parents, and she doesn't want to talk about it. And he says, "Oh, you'll tell me all about it in like 20 minutes."
Mm-hmm.
I meant to check the timestamp because she does tell him all about her parents, and it felt like it was about 20 minutes later, but I wasn't sure.
I didn't check that myself.
Yeah, that's probably pretty close.
And she doesn't make any sort of comment about it of like, "Oh shoot, like there it is." But yeah, he laid that right out, and he does that several times in the episode because it's not a magic trick. I mean, he is experiencing.
Yeah. Well, I think and she acknowledges it later throughout the episode in the other context as well. Like when they have the fight, and like she's like, "Do I even need to tell you what I'm gonna say?" It's like, "Yes, you."
You have to tell me. We need to go through these motions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's just kind of a freebie that they give us because we see it like laid out so plainly and like called attention to later by her. But yeah, that seems about right. It's probably pretty close to that timing.
I mean, I can't imagine what it was like to be like sitting down with a pad and pencil to be like, all right, let's write an episode about Dr. Manhattan, and it all has to make sense in not only the grander story we're telling, but also this just like every minute that he's on screen has opportunity to contradict itself and like break the canon of the story. And I couldn't find any hole. Like they just did it very well.
People can say what they want about this show, but no one can accuse them of not having very carefully researched and prepared like every facet of this.
Yeah, they've like left no holes.
Yeah, like everything seems like it fits, and it serves to complement the story rather than to like try and reinvent it or anything, which I think is good. I think that's realistically what any kind of adaptation like this should be.
Yeah. The only hole that I've noticed in this show so far is from a production and performance standpoint. When they pulled out Calvin's body, the actor, you could see his like pulse on his neck, which I was like, oh, he's still alive.
Hard to fake that one.
Yeah.
Maybe it was one of those nervous twitches.
Yeah. Could have been.
Like that guy in The Rock. When his toe foot shakes. Is it supposed to do that? Oh, sometimes.
That movie came up earlier in conversation today.
Yeah, that's a good movie.
That's a good movie.
We then cut back to Angela in the present, and she asks what the solution is. He then tells her that he can't tell her because then it won't be her idea. And she is intrigued and asks how long they are together. He says it is 10 years and that it ends tragically. Angela remarks that he's funny. He says she finds it amusing now, but that in 6 months, she asks him to leave during a fight. He says that right now, she's asking where he is. And we cut to the two of them making love, and she is asking where he is. He explains, and this is, 6 months in the future. He explains that he is in the bar the night that they met, telling her about the fight, which instigates a chain of events that lead up to the fight. And in the end, she asks him to leave.
Yeah, pretty cut and dry.
So in general, he's kind of this melancholy character because he is both experiencing the past, but he's also just like lost in thought half the time. It seems.
Oh yeah,
like.
I mean he can. That's the problem is he can never truly be present.
Yeah,
because he's all of them,
and he can duplicate himself. We don't see him do it in this episode, but he can duplicate himself as well.
Yeah.
Which this was an issue with Lori and him. He had duplicated himself
so
to be with her physically so that he could do work in the lab.
Efficient.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, maybe he learned his lesson on that one.
Yeah, I guess so.
but yeah, the experiencing all of his memories at once like that doesn't seem to be anything he has any control over.
Yeah, they're just flooding him all the time. But what leads to there's just this episode in particular is just filled with there is plot, but there's just a ton of dialogue and a ton just of back and forth and a lot of good quotable stuff.
Until now, my ability to know the future was immensely reassuring to you. It gave you a sense of safety and stability that you never had growing up in the orphanage. Was your childhood not filled with the constant fear that you would never have a family?
Don't you dare.
Because yours was taken away from you?
Stop.
We're in the fight now.
You kind of wonder, or at least I was, and I still wonder what this answers it a little bit, what the hook of their relationship is, what it is that she finds in him. And he says it right here, like his knowledge of the future, it gives her comfort. She's like, okay, I can bet on the next 10 years. I know nothing bad is going to happen.
Yeah.
which, like you said, with that series of unfortunate events, childhood,
Yeah.
she would cling on to something like that. Yeah, and then he recounts the last time he experienced fear, and Gila Flats, New Mexico in '59, and that he is always experiencing that moment along with everything else over and over again.
Yeah. And she just really doesn't get it. Like, she's like, oh, so 50 years you've not been afraid. It's like, no, I'm telling you.
Yeah, I've been afraid for 50 years.
Right. Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
I don't,
Well-
and we'll never stop being afraid, apparently.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, it's like you can't blame her because, like, the closest thing to a peer that he has is probably Adrian.
Mhm.
And even Adrian doesn't quite get it.
No. Mm-mm.
So, like, I
We-
mean,
yeah.
nobody has any clue what it's like to be him, to experience things the way he does. Like, everybody just assumes he's this all-powerful being, and they don't know. Like, just every waking moment of his life is essentially just reliving the scariest thing that
Everything,
ever happened to him, and everything.
Yeah, which we experience time linearly, and when we do think of the past, it's all memory,
Mm-hmm.
which he does not experience memory. There is no, he says there is no before for him. It's all
Correct. I mean,
yeah.
it's all
Mhm.
happening. There's no future either.
No.
But he doesn't have the freedom to move forward and backward in time. He's just experiencing it all at once.
Well, he kind of, later in this episode, we do experience a little bit of that, where he can relay messages back and forth in time through dialogue. But that's an interesting question.
Yeah, it's
Because when he does, every decision and every move he makes is to affect the future in some way. So in those terms, he kind of is time traveling, but can you...
well, he even
Can you
says later
qualify it
it's
as
that
that?
weird paradox. It's the Kyle Reese being John Connor's father thing in Terminator. Like,
yeah.
like
Yeah.
how could he send you back? Like, you know, if you didn't go back and make him in the first place. And he literally even says like the chicken or the egg,
Mhm.
because they have that conundrum. Which again, we get a lot of payoffs with the egg imagery in this episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting because like it's not quite past or present. It's all concurrent,
Mhm.
essentially. So it's real bizarre.
Sorry, going back to the egg. We've not really had any of the egg imagery for a while now. Like, it
It's been
started
a
out
little
so
bit.
strong.
Yeah, the last episode it was really prominent in was episode 4.
Yeah.
That was with the most eggs.
The most.
That was with the most. And then episode 5, we didn't really get any. That was the Looking Glass episode.
I can't think of anything in 6.
No.
I don't know. It just was so prevalent early on,
Mhm.
and then to come back in a
Well, I think
such a kind of
this is
foreboding
also
way.
this is the first episode that's really directly tied back to just Angela and Dr. Manhattan, though.
Mm-hmm.
Because the last episode was like still her kind of sorting out her past with her grandfather's memories, and then before that it was all Will's memories and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then before that it was Looking Glass.
Yes.
So like, so now that we've kind of come back to her, it makes sense that it's popped up a little more prevalently, because that egg imagery is clearly directly tied to her and John.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Even again later in this episode.
Yeah. When he wants to make waffles.
Yeah.
Like Donkey and Shrek.
I'm making waffles.
But
So she tells him to leave.
yeah. Well, and before that, before we get too far,
yeah.
he says that her favorite song is about to start,
Yes.
in which the Tunnel of Love starts playing, and it has no connection with her at all.
Nope.
But it will.
Eventually it becomes her favorite song.
Yeah, and which is a whole, the Tunnel of Love is just a metaphor for these 10 years that they are going to experience, because he says that can't see anything in it. He just knows that she's there at the beginning and she's there at the end. We also get, speaking of tunnels, Looking Glass talks about tunnels in episode 5, about how there is a light at the end of the tunnel, he believes.
Yeah, remember back when Tim Blake Nelson was in this show?
Yeah, I have definitely been missing him.
Yeah. I'm sure we'll get him back for this last one. I was half expecting him to show up in this one.
Yeah, because they showed in the previously on, they showed the 7th Cavalry members.
Storming his
Yeah,
house.
so I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, we finally gonna. Oh, okay.
Now they tricked us.
But she asks him to leave, and he does. And Dr. Manhattan arrives in Antarctica and approaches Karnak, Adrian Veidt's headquarters. He finds Adrian in front of his wall of observation monitors, cursing the modern world and mankind's constant need to build their godforsaken bombs. And Manhattan remarks that this may appear paradoxical, but they make them feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
And Adrian turns around and instantly knows it's him, because only Dr. Manhattan would have the balls to show up here wearing nothing but his birthday suit.
Yeah,
I was honestly expecting more of a reaction out of him, just knowing if he knew it was Dr. Manhattan, and he's not talked to him since that time 24 years ago where he left him with that haunting cryptic those last words. You just think, I was expecting him to see him and be like, oh, it's you, like, let's get to work.
Yeah,
Like,
he's very nonplussed about
yeah.
it. Which, like, I mean, part of me wonders if that's just him finally accepting it as, like, if Dr. Manhattan strolls back into my world, he's going to do it whenever he wants to anyway. So
Yeah.
why feel one way or the other about it?
So, going back to the comics, I imagine Adrian being, the most, the smartest, the best,
Smartest man in the world.
strongest, whatever. Like he's the best athlete or whatever, right? Too. I imagine there's some sort of just competition between Adrian and Dr. Manhattan, not necessarily the other way around, but like Adrian has always got to feel some level of competitive with him, like
Yeah.
To an
Or-
extent.
He's fascinated with him.
he'd have to be.
Yeah.
Well, and he also knew that Dr. Manhattan was the only one that could possibly derail his plans for 11-2 as well.
Yeah.
So much so that he had multiple contingency plans
Yeah,
in
we
effect,
find
which
that
we
out.
find out. Then, of course, we all I love their back and forth. This might be one of my favorite scenes in the entire show so far. Like this was a lot of fun watching those two go back and forth, and again, like it feels very true to those characters. Like at this point, like Dr. Manhattan is the same as he's always been, for the most part. But now he's kind of weary of what he's been doing and looking to integrate himself. And Adrian is clearly weary of trying to save a world that doesn't want to be saved. It seems like, so that they kind of strangers on a train. They've got this perfect solution for one another. They swap what they're doing or whatever. And then, of course, we find out that Adrian is, of course, engineering the squid rain.
Yep.
To keep up the illusion of the alien invasion. John even says something to the effect of still fabricating alien incursions.
Yeah, I can get to that. Yeah, we cut to Manhattan in Adrian's lab. Adrian reminisces about the last time they saw each other, while Manhattan is experiencing it and narrating it. And we see Adrian working in his lab and creating squid showers. Manhattan remarks that he's still fabricating alien incursions, I see. Adrian adds, and maintaining world peace, one cephalopod at a time. And Adrian finds Manhattan's form interesting and guesses that he doesn't want to just look mortal, but be one. He tells him that he could insert a device that would short-circuit his memory, making him unaware of his true identity. Manhattan asks how long it would take for him to make this device, and Adrian responds by saying, I made it 30 years ago.
Great line.
Which was so awesome.
Oh, that was a great callback. That was an amazing line. He has that great line earlier where he says to him, "Why does the blue man want to be human?"
Yeah, that's fun.
And he says, yeah.
Jeremy Irons just seems to be having fun with this
absolutely.
character.
How
Like,
can you not? Like, and it's just a fun position to put this character in too. Like this character who was so confident and sure until one line from Dr. Manhattan rattled him for the rest of his life.
Oh yeah, because he's a mess sitting in front of the monitors. You see all of these artifacts that have been just like kicked over, and the place is a mess. So what we see him going through on Europa is not the first time something.
No,
like
it's not
that has
very
happened. He's
dissimilar at
been
all.
spiraling for the past few decades. It looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course he sets it up. He said the intrinsic field was Plan B, B for blow you up.
Yeah.
And then the ring was Plan A for amnesia.
Yeah.
And of course he lathered it in tachyons, the one way to hide it from John, which is how he clouded Dr. Manhattan from seeing what actually happened on 11-2 to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, otherwise that would have been the one person that could have stopped him.
Yeah.
So that is from the comic then.
The tachyons.
Yeah,
Yeah. Tachyons are
tachyons.
the only way you can mask anything from Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah,
it confuses him.
He refers to it, I think, as like the one force in the universe that even Dr. Manhattan can't manipulate.
So it's his kryptonite.
Yeah.
Yeah. The I did it 30 minutes ago line is a callback to the comic, because when Night Owl and Rorschach approach Ozymandias about everything that the plan that he has put in place, they're like, oh, thank God we came here to stop you before you tried to do this crazy thing.
Yeah, and he like monologues, and then his response is like, "Oh, you think I would have told you about it if you thought you could stop it? It already happened."
He says, yeah.
Yeah, which
I
is,
did it
again,
30
it's just
minutes.
another great line from that comic.
That's brilliant. Like
Oh, yeah, it's genius. Because, like, how often is it the opposite, where it's like a Bond villain or a supervillain monologuing, and then it's like, oh, but you haven't done it yet. Okay, I'm going to stop your plan now then. But he's finally like, yeah, no, I wouldn't tell you if I hadn't already done it. I'm not stupid. I'm not some I'm not some Republic serial villain.
That's exactly what he
is
says.
the exact
yes.
line. But yeah, it was great, and having that little callback to it here was great. And then, of course, Dr. Manhattan then offers him the chance to go be worshipped and adored
Yep.
in the new Garden of Eden that he's created.
Yeah.
yeah, you
Which
get the
he's
town
very-
mouse, city mouse situation.
Mm-hmm.
Very eager to take that on. But just so many like fun Easter eggs throughout this whole sequence and their whole dialogue. I love the yellow clocks all over the place, which we see from the comics. The line, I was gambling that you had morals.
Mm-hmm.
That he would actually care enough to keep his secret. I also like the line because he's very interested in Dr. Manhattan's current form, and he goes, "It's not the 80s anymore, John. This kind of appropriation is considered quite problematic now."
Yeah. Oh, then he has that great line, like, I can only think of one reason why you would come down from on high, and then like there's a beat, and then he just goes, "What's her name?"
Yep. He knows.
Which, yeah, again, just shows like Adrian is the closest thing to a peer that John really has.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he's the only one who has been able to surprise him because he uses the tachyons. He used it on 11-2, and he did it again now. So he's like,
These are
Well,
the
this
few
guy's-
things that he's never been able to
yeah,
predict.
he's somebody I can talk to, and maybe he's got something up his sleeve that can actually, give me the thrill of not knowing. Which, on 11-2, when he shows up and he finds everything, he's almost, I don't want to say gleeful, but he has this fascination with like trying to figure out what was going on, and Laurie's like just horrified at everything that's going on. He's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I just forgot the thrill of not knowing something."
Yeah. Which is a weird time to trot that out.
Yeah,
Well, but I mean,
But again, for him, that's the time.
it's the only chance you get.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Dr. Manhattan he doesn't know everything. You said something earlier about him being the smartest man. Is that actually true? Is he the smartest?
well, like the
Ozymandias,
most
that's-
Ozymandias, yes,
Yeah.
and he's like
But Dr. Manhattan is not.
Dr. Manhattan.
He's-
It's not smarts, as more of it's just like kind of like all-knowing, omnipotent.
Yeah. It's
Right.
more omnipotence than anything.
But if he wasn't there to experience something, he wouldn't necessarily know it, would he?
That's an interesting
It's
question.
up for debate.
We don't
Well,
really.
But also because he doesn't seemingly attempt to try and change time or outcomes, then we wouldn't know. If he did know, it's not important to him, at least.
Yeah, I don't really know what the rules are for what he can and can't know based on
Yeah.
him physically being present for
I'm
anything.
trying to think if anything he relates is ever outside of the context of him being present for it.
Mm-hmm.
Because like even knowing about Angela's parents, it's not that he like saw back in time. It's that he just knows that that's what she's thinking, I think, since he's there with her, maybe. Or maybe he does, like, see far back to, like, even when it doesn't affect him.
Yeah. I don't know.
He does, because that's how he knows about Laurie's father being the comedian.
Yeah, that's true. He
Because
would not know that
remembers back
information
her
without-
childhood and the arguments with the original Silk Spectre and everything. But, like, that was long before he was ever in her life.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, he just intuits that from, like, kind of going back and knowing that moment in time in her life. So
Yeah,
I think
good
that
to-
omnipotence does work outside of just him being connected to something.
Also stands to reason why Veidt would hide all of his secret plans in the tachyons. Otherwise, I'm not expecting a visit from Dr. Manhattan. Why should I worry about hiding these things?
Yeah, exactly.
We see different designs of cephalopods up on the wall that could have been used in 11-2, or maybe new ones that he's coming up with. We see the Ozymandias action figure on his desk, which there's a little memo in the comic at the end of one of the issues where they're coming up with a new line of superhero or masked vigilante toys because he's the one who's licensed them all and he's the one making money off of all of them. So, and it just like looked perfectly like it was taken out of the comic, which is very fun. And then he
Slightly unrelated. Somebody even just going back to the comic. A friend of mine, made the mention that even the Bible illustration looks like it's done in Dave Gibbons' art style.
Oh,
The drawing of Adam and Eve that we see,
Yeah, I could see that.
which I thought was kind of a cool little connection.
Oh, and then he tells Dr. Manhattan before he wants to use Plan A, he says that if he has any business to take care of, now would be the time. So Manhattan says that he and Angela's grandfather have matters to discuss.
Yeah, we really didn't get enough of that conversation. I'm sure it'll get referenced back too. But
Oh, I think so. So then we see Manhattan give Plan A to Angela, and she suggests that they leave Vietnam and start over in Tulsa. And we cut back to the two of them in the bar, and Angela asks him to create life. He then produces an egg in his hand. And she asks if they have children, and she remarks that she doesn't want kids and will not have kids. He tells her that they are children that they adopt in Tulsa, and that gives her pause. He says that she told him it is where her family comes from. And he explains there is a period of time he cannot see that she is at the beginning of and the end of. And she says that it sounds an awful lot like a tunnel of love. We cut forward to see Angela insert Plan A into his head.
And during this scene too, we again get that shadow imagery on the wall very briefly of the two of them, which
The two lovers.
that's one of my favorite visual callbacks that keeps popping up.
They've been putting it throughout the show. It's very exciting. Oh, and when he gives her Plan A, he says, I leave it entirely in your hands.
Yep.
Another
That
callback
line
to
again.
that line. Oh, and then very important, when he's talking about the kids.
Do we have any kids?
Yes, 3, a boy and 2 girls.
Are they like half gods?
I would never pass my abilities on to someone without their consent.
So that's the thing you can do? Give someone your powers?
I suppose I could transfer my atomic components into some sort of organic material. If someone were to consume it, they would inherit my powers.
So, you can put them in this egg, and if I ate it, I could walk on water.
Theoretically, yes.
They're setting the table there.
Yep.
For something next episode.
Maybe that's why he wanted to make waffles.
Yeah, it could be the waffles. I think more than likely it might be what the 7th Cavalry is doing with the romaine lettuce.
Oh, good point.
So we will see. And then just really awesome, as soon as she inserts Plan A into his head, we then see Angela holding Plan A as she has just removed it. So it just, you get this instant connection of like, this is his
tunnel,
memory.
end of the tunnel. Yep.
And then Manhattan takes his blue form and levitates. Angela tries to keep him up to speed, and he's a little non-responsive. And he explains that he is experiencing confusion as a result of the device being removed, and he's not entirely sure when he is. He then teleports out onto their pool and then teleports the children to the Dreamland Theater with their grandfather. This whole,
So much happening.
Yeah, a lot
man.
that happens real quick.
yeah.
Yeah, because of course the kids are terrified. Their introduction
Daddy.
is him walking on the pool in the backyard.
Yeah.
And then they're gone.
Yeah. Well, and then Topher even says it looks like Cal, and Angela's just it is.
And no sense in trying to hide this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then bam, they're at a theater with a grandfather that they've never met.
Yeah, whose motivation? I mean, who killed
We
cops?
don't know.
And
Yeah.
we don't like.
So yeah, so
Dr.
so far,
Manhattan trusts him, so
yeah, and then of course we go into that scene where while he's settling his unfinished business, Dr. Manhattan visits Will at the former Captain Metropolis's mansion,
Yeah, 'cause
which he
he-
left to Will. And then they discuss things concurrently while Angela is talking to John at the pool. And then again we get this Terminator paradox moment where she's the one who puts the idea of killing Judd.
yeah.
and
She
having-
asks how he knew that Crawford was part of the Cyclops.
Yes. And then
And
finally
he's like,
Clan
who?
Rob,
Who is Crawford?
which is great. Like that's part of what I was hoping because like we saw all these things from different times, influencing things. I was like, she's going to be the one that puts the idea in the head.
Yeah.
And then-
Terrifying notion.
Oh yeah, well and then she's clearly trying to come to terms with that in the short time that she can.
Yeah.
She was like,
Does not
did
have long.
I tell my grandfather to kill my friend and captain?
Yeah. To which Dr. Manhattan's like, is that is
Like,
that
I thought
a
it's a
bad
good
thing?
thing,
Like,
yeah.
like
Yeah.
you found out all this other stuff because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, I think I went in that scene. I went on the same kind of ride that Angela went on of like, oh, she started this, but wait, because of this, we
How?
found right, and like, it was just it's interesting because Dr. Manhattan just sees it basically as data. He's like,
Yeah.
It's like,
Yes,
yeah,
It all happens
so
concurrently, but she sees it as how could I in the future have influenced my grandfather in the past? Time travel's a real sticky wicket.
it is.
indubitably.
And get answers to what happened on the White Knight.
Yes.
Because there's always the question of what happened to that other cavalry
other
member
gunman,
who was about
yeah.
to shoot her, and calls back to Veidt saying that
Without the awareness of your abilities, you wouldn't know to use them. Except perhaps as a reflex in life-threatening situations.
And then he explodes the second gunman's head.
yeah. He also tells her, because she asked him to get off the pool. He says, well, you need to see me on the pool. It's important for later. So we're obviously going to get an answer to that next week
Yep.
as to why him being on the pool looking like Jesus was important.
So we got kind of this little teaser for the question about if he can pass his ability on, which seems to be yes. But he says he wouldn't pass it without their consent. We also know that he slept with a decent amount of women. Like, Laurie's never had any side effects or anything from sleeping with him.
No, nobody has. You're made to believe that Janie got cancer from being from him.
Right.
But that's not the case. That was actually
That was all generated.
Adrian, giving people who used to be around Manhattan cancer to create this whole Manhattan cancer scare. But it's all fabricated.
Because he did the same thing to Moloch as well. So yeah, I think it has to be more of a conscious thing as opposed to like his power being a sexually transmitted disease.
Yeah.
Ah, great. I got the Manhattan.
Yeah.
Yeah, now I can just explode people's heads with the snap of my fingers. I didn't even need a gauntlet for it.
I wonder if we're going to get some sort of, like we've said before, like Dr. Manhattan shows up on the scene and just everything gets real crazy.
Yeah. Well, and again, it makes sense that's why they waited to pull him out until the next to last episode as well.
Yeah. So what I'm hoping doesn't happen is next episode we get Senator Keene becomes Dr. Manhattan, and then Angela finds out she's been Dr. Manhattan all along, and you get these two big blue people fight, and like it devolves into like a classic third act superhero. And I don't think it will.
No,
I
I
have
can
no
guarantee
expect-
that's
No,
not
I don't
Right.
think it's
how
gonna
this
turn
show
into
goes.
anything
but
like
they're
that.
it's like amping up towards that direction, and I'm like,
Them tricking
man, that
Senator Keene to wish he was a genie and then trap himself in a lamp or something.
Oh, itty bitty living space.
Yeah, nothing's more powerful than tachyons. Why don't you wish you were a tachyon field?
So Dr. Manhattan, like John, as he's becoming Dr. Manhattan,
Yeah.
slowly, he slowly kind of loses his humanity, right?
Mhm.
Like it's not all at once that he becomes even the Dr. Manhattan that we're introduced to here.
Yeah.
He-
The first decade of him being this being, he's still like trying to like stay connected with Janie and trying to maintain this facade of like, yeah, I care. I'm human, right? I'm trying to do the right thing. Like they send him to Vietnam and he's like, yeah, I'll do what the government tells me to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, just the
becomes
longer
more
he's
independent.
around,
Yeah.
as he watches the people he loves like age out around him,
Mm-hmm.
essentially.
But even at that point, he was he still kind of this not omnipresent? Like he was experiencing time.
Yeah, and
In one
I
moment.
think it's during Vietnam that we see him start to lose that connection.
Yeah.
Because the first time we really see it is when the comedian guns down the villager woman who says she's pregnant with his child. And he accuses Dr. Manhattan of being this passive observer. Is like, you could have stopped me. Like, you could have saved that woman's life. But, like, you're just as disconnected as any of us.
Could have turned it into a snowflake. He could have come like so many different things he gives
Yeah.
him of what he could have done or could not have done to save her.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, like, so say Keene becomes Dr. Manhattan. Does he become just indifferent in that moment?
It's hard to
Because
say.
John
'cause
didn't.
Well, because, I mean, that's the thing. Like, also, John didn't have context for what he became.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, there was nothing. Like, he was literally the first superpower. The
He had
only
no choice. He
superpower to
didn't
really
realize.
exist. Whereas, like, now there have been decades. Like, we've seen the influence. We've seen the scale and the scope of Dr. Manhattan's abilities. So there's at least a blueprint to work from.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, they're not going to know exactly like what it's, and who's to say that this process will make things be the same for them? Like maybe John's the outlier. Like maybe they won't experience time the same way he does. Maybe they won't be so fractured or disconnected. Like maybe they'll be able to be present
Yeah.
or something because, so who knows? Like it's kind of unpredictable.
Well, part of his origin is he was only able to put himself back together because he understood atoms, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's true too. So yeah, they could literally do it, and they could just end up scattering themselves all across creation.
Yeah.
Like that. Yeah, it's a very unpredictable and dangerous thing they're trying to do.
Yeah.
Like I think if Adrian Veidt couldn't figure it out, like I'm real curious to see what's going to happen when and if they pull the trigger on their plan, if they're even able to get that far.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. But in reference to what you're asking about, and it kind of ties into the whole when he starts to lose himself in Vietnam, shortly before that, when they want him to be like a vigilante, we see a scene of him in the comic in a nightclub where Moloch is. He says, "It's November. The newspapers call me a crime fighter. So the Pentagon says I must fight crime." And they show him doing the first time he explodes somebody's head.
Mm-hmm.
And so you see all these people just reacting in horror around him. And he says, "The morality of my activities escapes me." So, like you said, they were hiding his face and they were hiding his true physical form for so long. What did you guys think of the like true Dr. Manhattan state that they presented us with?
As a Cal, basically.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think his appearance beforehand is really not the point.
Mm-hmm.
You would become fixated on it as a viewer, but it's not the point.
And I think it's good that they gave it to us in a small dose as well.
Yeah.
Because I mean, even for an HBO show, they're not working with the budget that like a Hollywood movie does. Like even Game of Thrones, at its most expensive, would have been hard pressed to do something. Which we also saw with a lot of their CGI. So yeah, I'm glad that we got it in limited doses, but again too, like it's not even. I think it works not necessarily because it looks unreal, but because it looks not of this world. Because it looks otherworldly, because it looks ethereal, almost like I don't think him clearly being a computer effect is meant to be what we take away.
Yeah.
Like, because the idea is that this is a form that didn't exist until he existed.
Mm-hmm.
So like, who's to say how close to humanity that's supposed to look? It's like maybe it's supposed to be this giant, big, blue glowing thing floating around in like pajama pants and a t-shirt in the kitchen.
Yeah, I was honestly thrown. At first, it was exciting, and then they gave him pupils, and I was like, "Oh, this looks weird."
Yeah.
Yeah, when it shifted more to Cal's face.
Yeah.
Too, that was interesting that like they shifted it from being neutral to like just being Cal, but Dr. Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes me wonder if they didn't try it first without pupils and then just go, he's not relatable. Like you can't. There's so much that you read from just somebody's eyes that I don't know, because it was off-putting a little bit, especially because his pupils are like his eyes are
They're
brown,
just all
and typically he's usually depicted with white eyes, just white. Yeah.
I think part of that too might
And
have
he still
been,
had the eyeliner too.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And it was fine. Like it didn't really like take me out of the moment at all. It was a little weird to how I've even seen him, and that's.
I think part of that too might have been a conscious decision because that's he also has to consider that's the first time that his children are seeing him in that form. So it could very easily have been as simple as like, oh, I don't want to terrify them any more than I'm about to.
Yeah, that's true.
There's got to be this moment of mourning for him, though, because he, for the first time in 50 years or ever, I guess depending on how you look at his timeline, he's coming back to, I'm experiencing all of it at once.
Yeah, it's been just like a flood of information.
He
which
got
is
away
why
from
he's so
it.
unresponsive in the beginning.
Yeah.
Hold on, let me reboot for a second.
Kind of, yeah. But so beforehand, he wasn't able to tell Angela what happened during the 10 years, right? Because he didn't have memory of it. It kind of screwed with him.
Yeah.
I'm curious, and this is just kind of semantic. It doesn't really probably
If he
impact
has
anything at the
memories
plot.
of
Now
those.
that he's experienced it, can he remember it, even if he can't live it? Or maybe he can. Maybe he's lived it now, and so I don't know. It opened a new question that was like, okay, if he experiences everything, but this tachyon stuff muddles with his.
So it seems like
abilities.
he has them to some point, or at least anticipate it, because like he was able to foresee sending the kids to Will and stuff like that, and knowing that when he was going to come out of it.
Well, even the White Knight, he was able to defend himself and Angela.
Well, defend himself, but he didn't foresee it.
Right. But
Because
like he has
that
some
happens
sort of
almost-
access.
That happens like roughly halfway through their relationship,
Yeah.
their time together.
My point there being, he didn't stop being Captain Manhattan, Dr. Manhattan. He
just didn't
he
know
just
that he
wasn't
was.
aware of it,
Yeah.
right? So I don't know. I maybe we'll get an answer to that. Maybe we won't. I don't know that it's relevant. It was just a little curiosity I was wondering about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, and it's also an interesting question too. When he becomes Cal, keeps tying back to me. Like, what did she find so interesting in Dr. Manhattan? Because she's afraid of losing who he is, and he's like, "Oh, well, you won't lose me." But I'm like, what is it that she? Okay, so he becomes a person who's not Dr. Manhattan, who doesn't have the knowledge and the power. What is the sum total of his personality that she's looking for that Cal is going to have?
I think the knowledge and personality is still there.
Mm-hmm.
Because remember, he has the conversation with the kids when he tells them that God doesn't exist.
Yeah.
which very much seems like a Dr. Manhattan thing to say.
Mm-hmm.
And Adrian even says to him, like, only his memories
Yeah.
will be lost. So, like, his personality, everything that makes him him, I think, is still there, except for the knowledge that he is the most powerful being in the galaxy. Like, that's locked off. But yeah, so like we know that we don't know how much of that 10 years ish that he's retained, if any.
Mm-hmm.
Because so far everything that he's acknowledged and discussed,
Mm-hmm.
but it seems like he remembered. Like, it seems like it was his memory of the White Knight. Maybe removing that device like unlocked everything. Maybe like he still experienced those memories, but they essentially became repressed over time.
Yeah.
That kind of makes sense to me.
Sure, why not?
Yeah.
He also doesn't fully fall in love with her until that night 10 years later.
Yeah.
But
when she says she's gonna go out and save him, even though he tells her it's hopeless.
yeah.
Ironically, coming out of the love tunnel, and that's when he falls in love with her.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter to him because he's always in love with her. But anyways, he does have the question about the chicken and the egg thing when bringing up the Angela's grandfather and what started everything.
Mm-hmm.
But then he just announces that he's hungry and teleports into the kitchen to make waffles.
Three different times she teleports on him, and every single time she screams, "Mother!" Yeah, it's so good. It was a great bet.
Has he always eaten? Is that
No, I would not know him to be hungry in the comics. That is one thing that I'm like, all right,
that seemed interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Unless, again, like the waffles were for the purpose of maybe transferring his power to her.
He knew that she really likes waffle.
Yeah,
because like he went to it like it was more important than the fact that the 7th Cavalry was on their doorstep
and saying as much. Like,
Angela tells him that they don't have time for this. She starts to explain why they're in danger and that the cavalry is coming. And he says that the 7th Cavalry is already here and that they will use a tachyonic cannon to teleport him involuntarily and then destroy him. Angela arms herself and prepares to go out the back door and take on the cavalry. And while doing so, she is completely outgunned and surrounded. And then Manhattan shows up and begins blowing all of their minds.
Exploding
literally.
heads.
Yeah.
Before he showed up, I thought for sure this was Lube Man's moment.
Oh.
He comes back in a big way.
Lube Man to the rescue.
He's coming.
He slides right in.
Yeah, I like this sequence just because it made me think of the end of Kingsman.
Oh, yeah.
When they start blowing up all the rich people and their heads literally just pop. It very much looked like that, which I thought was great.
Being in slow-mo. But then she tells him that he was wrong. And then he says he's sorry before the tachyonic cannon fires and he is taken away.
Mm-hmm. And she screams his name, and then we cut back to her saying, "I can't call you Dr. Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
What's your name?" John without an H.
Yeah. So,
it's weird because like it simultaneously it ends on this really tragic moment and then this really beautiful moment like at the beginning, which again I think they do a great job with the storytelling, because like now not only are we cutting back and forth between things, but like this is the closest that we get to experiencing the things the way that Dr. Manhattan does, which I think is an amazing way to approach an episode about him.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I was thinking that any other show would be, you end on the big dramatic moment of him being taken and her screaming and then cut to credits. But you get this little part at the end where she agrees to go out with him to dinner. You get this bittersweet thing going on.
Yeah. And then the credits roll. And I'm glad. I almost stopped watching.
Oh, I was wondering. Okay.
But then like I heard dialogue. I was like, oh no, something's going to happen.
Yeah.
So then we get this great like extended post-credits scene with Adrian where the servants are smearing him with tomatoes. Yeah. And then he's sitting in his cell reading, and the game warden comes to him with a cake with 6 candles, I think, on it.
Seven.
Seven.
which tracks with him being on there 7 years.
Yep.
He says that Crookshanks and Phillips insisted on making the cake for him.
I was here, the very first to emerge from the water. I was here when he put light in the sky and air in my lungs. I saw grass sprout from dead earth, and soon after I saw him bring the beasts forth to graze upon it. He made heaven before my very eyes. Why is heaven not enough?
This is not my home. My home is 390 million miles away. And my children, all 8 billion of them, are undoubtedly standing in their cribs, crying out in desperation for me to return. Heaven is not enough because heaven doesn't need me.
And then the warden leaves him with the cake, and then Adrian discovers a horseshoe inside, in which he is overjoyed and begins scraping it against the floor.
And we get the payoff with the horseshoe.
Yeah.
So many episodes he said, "No, not yet."
Not yet.
So the horseshoe shows up again, and it just really it begs more questions now of like, has he known he's going to need it in this cell all along?
I think it's a possibility he anticipates, because we saw even with Dr. Manhattan, he had multiple contingencies in place.
Yeah.
And I think he assumed that being captured while trying to escape was definitely going to happen.
Yeah, the
It
horseshoe
was more of an eventuality rather than a like if.
Yeah.
And then of course, he starts trying to dig his way out with the horseshoe. So I thought that was really great. I love too. There's two things I really liked about this scene. The first one, Adrian accuses the game warden of not knowing loneliness just because his big blue daddy went out for cigarettes and never came back,
Yeah.
which is a great line. And then the kind of parallels between like the fall of Lucifer and the game warden. It's like with him essentially kind of growing jealous of being abandoned in favor of what Dr. Manhattan left them for. Like the angels came jealous, like when God created life. I thought that was a really interesting parallel, and I thought it was a good job. They didn't poke at it too much beyond that, but like it seemed pretty obvious to me. And I certainly don't consider myself a theological scholar by any means, but I know enough of the general stuff in there, and I thought that was a really cool kind of parallel to draw with
that is very interesting.
with those characters.
I was not thinking of that.
Yeah, it was literally the first thing that jumped into my brain. It's like, oh, the game warden is just Lucifer.
Wow.
So there's a line in there that Adrian has about his children. What?
I think
He's just
referring
talking
to
about
Earth.
the population of
Yeah,
the
he's
That's all
referring
he's-
to
okay.
humanity.
because he considers them his children because he
It's
is a
part of
one
the world that he
responsible for all
right.
their lives.
That's
He
what I
has a
took
lot
away.
of-
I
yeah.
just didn't know if there was more
Nope.
more context to that.
Nope, that was literally it. He is also arrogant enough to consider himself, because at a time he was mankind's savior,
Yeah.
and
Well,
in
yeah.
a sense he still kind of is, and he even says to Dr. Manhattan earlier, like, no one knows, like only a handful of people know what he did for the world, and he's just sitting here alone, kind of tending the lighthouse, as it were, to make sure that humanity stays safe and finds its way home every day.
Yeah.
It is interesting. We finally see what Adrian was like as the world probably last knew him on Earth, and then when the story starts picking up, we start get the hints of Adrian Veidt confirmed dead and all this other stuff, and we're catching up, bringing us up to speed on. It seems reasonable that this man who is just given up seemingly entirely on life.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, well, and that's the interesting thing too, is because like him being declared dead, like, because initially I think we talked about it a little, and we thought that was maybe kind of a hoax, but like realistically, now that we know what we know, it was probably a matter of the time that he was missing, That like, 'cause if somebody's missing so long, they're eventually just declared dead,
Right.
which is probably more likely what actually happened. Because it seems like realistically the only person that knew where he was Dr. Manhattan. So, and again, it stands to reason that the message was to Dr. Manhattan at this point.
I think it's true.
Yeah?
I
Still think it's true?
I think True's the one who knows where he is.
Okay.
You think it's true? I took that the wrong way. Sorry.
Oh no, I think it's Lady True. We did not get to touch on that because back in the on Karnak, he asks Dr. Manhattan asks him how he knows he was on Europa, and he says a little elephant told him.
Yes, that's right.
So,
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
I think there's also something in this episode. We get him laying out his different plans to stop Manhattan, A, B, and we don't hear about C. But then he says,
or maybe
"Come
D
get
stands
me."
for Plan D.
That's I don't know. Or he has cute names for A for amnesia, B for blown up, D for daughter. I don't know, like
Daddy.
right? Like they're very straightforward names he had for
Yeah.
his plans. I don't know.
I also find it interesting that we're going to intersect here. We're catching up. He's been on Europa for 7 years at this point with the 7 candles. We've got 3 years that are unaccounted for.
Yeah.
So
That's true too, because this would put him in 2016 now, right?
and it made me think about what you initially thought. I think you both thought at the beginning of episode 4 that it was a flashback when Lady True visits the farmers. And I thought it was happening in real time, but I'm kind of
Wondering if the spacecraft was him.
I'm wondering, if that happened 3 years ago and what she claims as mine is him. I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because that's one of the only things we haven't really gotten an explanation for at this point, and the candles in the timeline that tracks.
Yeah.
Because he would have been on Europa like during the White Night and all that. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, which would also give us the answer to her father that we got. Was that last episode?
Yes.
Saying
She
that
says
he was
he'll
going to be there. Yeah.
Then we need some answers to what's been going on with him, if he has been on Earth for the past 3 years.
Yeah.
How he ties in everything. So, one last thing in that scene is he's reading the book Fog Dancing.
I was wondering what the book was.
Yeah, and that was the book that we see in the previous episode. There's a David Cronenberg movie based off of this book.
Yes.
It's written by Max Shea, and it's about dealing with post-Vietnam, specifically Vietnam vets. And in Peteypedia this week, we get a little excerpt from an article that Petey himself wrote summarizing the book 10 years ago. And the Fog Dancing, the book, I think, ties heavily into Lube Man.
Interesting.
It's cited as being very influential to the masked heroes. They talk about how the comedian owned a copy of Fog Dancing. They found a copy in Rorschach's apartment and Night Owl's. But in Petey's summary, there's a little excerpt I took from it. It says, in the Fog Dancers in the book are the special forces from Vietnam. So he says, you see him now in your mind's eye, moving through boiled clouds of sunset haze, wearing his gas mask and skin-tight silver suit shimmering with SPF 666, looking slick and doing what must be done in secret to keep you and me and all of us free. Or so we tell ourselves.
No, yeah, that sounds like Lube Man.
Yeah, so I think Petey is like very influenced by this Fog Dancing book and the imagery of this costume.
Interesting.
At this point, we're coming up on the last episode. I feel like maybe this is just a question that doesn't get answered on purpose.
I think it's going to get answered.
You think so?
I think they're not. They don't.
I feel like everything has been deliberate in this show.
I don't feel like this is.
I'm not saying it's important.
It's all but confirmed that Petey is Lube Man, right? I mean, like there's just there's evidence that seems stacked up against him. I don't know.
Yeah. There's also another one of the these fog dancers in the book named Rawhide. So I would guess that if he chooses to go by a name that's not Lube Man, he would probably prefer Rawhide.
Oh,
I would
that makes
guess.
sense. It's definitely a better name.
Yeah.
I guess we'll find out or not in a week.
Yeah. Or maybe Adrian's been Lube Man for the past 3 years.
Oh.
Because he was definitely influenced by the book as well. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he says it's his favorite book. Is that what he said?
I don't know that he says it's his favorite,
Just
but
says
he
that he
does
likes
not.
it.
Yeah, because the game warden offers to like get him a different book, and he says, "No, I like this one. You wouldn't understand it. It's about loneliness."
Yeah.
Anything else to say about this episode, or any predictions, or?
No, I'm gonna. I think I've called enough shots right. I'm curious. I'm just curious to see how it plays out now.
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, then in the meantime, you can find us on Twitter at WhoWatchesPod and also on Instagram and Facebook. You can reach the show at WhoWatchesPodcast@gmail.com. Episodes of this show can be found on Apple Podcasts or any podcatcher of your choice. We are also on YouTube, where we post every episode of this show. And please subscribe and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And Ryan, where can people find more of your work?
You can find me at Harbjagen, that's HARBJAGEN on Twitter. What about you, Dustin?
You can catch everything I got going on at DustinMeadowsComedy.com, my blogs, my social links, all that good stuff. All right there at DustinMeadowsComedy.com.
Awesome. And don't forget, we are continuing to cover the Disney Plus series, The Mandalorian, which we are having great fun with as well. And you can find episodes of that show on this feed. And we are just really looking forward to next week's episode. Don't want it to end, but
My
also,
goodness. It's like a perfect streak, though.
yeah,
Like,
very
Yeah.
excited for them to wrap it up and see how they do it. And I don't know if I want another season of this. I really am
Yeah, self-contained is pretty
leaning,
good.
yes, heavily into. I don't want them
We'll
to
see, I guess.
spoil us or spoil whatever it is they have going for them. But we look forward to the. Actually, we got 2 very exciting episode 9s next week to look forward to.
Oh, yeah.
yes.
In the meantime, thank you and good night.
Quis custodiet ipsos custodes?